Of course, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, in part because of its close and complex history with Russia. Nor will Russia be dislodged from Crimea or deterred from further escalation by military force. The United States and NATO do not seek any conflict with Russia. And if the Russian leadership stays on its current course, together we will ensure that this isolation deepens. Sanctions will expand, and the toll on Russia's economy, as well as its standing in the world, will only increase.
That will enhance our underlying effort to accommodate the Russian oligarchs and make sure we take their ill-begotten gains. We're going to accommodate them. We're going to seize their yachts, their luxury homes, and other ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Kleptocracy, and the guys who are the kleptocracies. But these are bad guys.
The United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. And it is an alliance that is strong and enduring.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway, 75.
2021, we kept reiterating that Ukraine was going to join. We kept saying that over and over again. So our diplomats are lying?
Yes.
So,
yes. That's the real world, guys. Come on.
but you could.
That's the real world.
Wait a second. Our diplomats are lying all the time, yet the Russians should trust them when they offer assurances.
No.
And we shouldn't.
Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours. If it is me, it's ours.
Vladimir Putin is immense. If he succeeds in Ukraine, he's not going to stop there. He's going to challenge the freedom and democracy.
Because of Russia-Ukrainian conflict, there are some advices to calm you down. First, imagine that this is happening in Africa. Imagine this is happening in the Middle East. Imagine Ukraine is Palestine. Imagine Russia is the United States.
Будут поставляться, из этого мы будем делать соответствующие выводы, применять свои средства поражения, которых у нас достаточно, для того, чтобы наносить удары по тем объектам, по которым мы...
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him... America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him...
Thanks also, of course, to the inspirational leadership of Vladimir Putin. The inspirational leadership of Volodymyr Zelensky. Women in positions of power. If Putin was a woman, which he obviously isn't, but if he were, I really don't think he would have embarked on a crazy macho war of invasion and violence in the way that he has.
Think of this moment as a moment that is about great momentum, inspired by, yes, optimism, inspired by a crisis, no doubt,
but inspired by also our collective ability to see what can be unburdened by what has been.
If you want a perfect example of toxic masculinity, it's what he's doing in Ukraine.
So what we're going to do now is going to breach and make entry. Push across the side, keep it where it's
Going well. Oh, great. Hello, welcome.
И мы не стыдимся показывать себя такими, какими мы есть.
Россия несет ответственность за судьбу этих людей. Вы не считаете, что
Нет,
этот
слушайте,
смертный приговор...
меня глаза Запада не интересуют вообще.
А вы считаете, что там независимый суд? Да.
Я убежден, что там независимый суд. А вы считаете, у вас независимый суд?
А вообще по поводу отношений с Великобританией сейчас, да? Они, сказать, что они плохие, это, конечно, мягко сказано.
Да вы знаете, по-моему, там уже нет никакого поля для маневра в этих отношениях.
А как вы...
Потому что и Джонсон, и Трасс заявляют публично, мы должны победить Россию, мы должны поставить Россию на колени. Ну давайте, ставьте.
А как вы...
Потому что и Джонсон, и Трасс заявляют публично, мы должны победить Россию, мы должны поставить Россию на колени. Ну давайте, ставьте.
So you've heard us say this, that what we see Russia's doing, and we've been very clear about this, is that they're using energy, they're weaponizing energy, and it's choosing to one of the things that has been out there, to shut down the pipeline of Nord Stream 1.
Incredible progress on the economy from where we were a year and a half ago. We got a long way to go because of inflation, because of I call it the Putin tax increase. Putin because of gasoline and all that grain he's keeping from being able to get to the market. Now I'm fighting like hell to lower costs on things that you talk about around your kitchen table.
To answer, indeed, our aim is not only to freeze but to seize the assets. This is the aim. This is what the legal basis is concerned, not trivial. So, as you rightly said already, we are working on that. We have created a task force with all the experts also from our member states and international experts, which is called Seize and Freeze Task Force, not only to map what is out there, has been frozen, but also what are the legal preconditions that have to be given to be able to seize and use these assets, for example, for the reconstruction of Ukraine. So my answer is a mixed one. The will is there. But legally, it is not trivial. There's a lot of work still in it to reach that goal. Very important is always to keep in mind, we insist on the rule of law, and therefore we abide to the rule of law, and therefore this process has to be legally sound.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it. It's because started calling me Joe Bidenopoulos because, oh, you think I'm kidding? I'm not joking, am I? A little school called Holy Rosary Grade School across from the Claymont Fire Hall, and all my buddies either became a firefighter, a cop, or a priest. I wasn't qualified for any of them, so here I am. But you know,
those sanctions on our fertilizers, and then they cancel those sanctions and they don't impose any sanctions on food because everyone wants to eat. The entire world wants to eat. What sanctions could be discussed? And as for this blitzkrieg against our economy, well, they failed, obviously. Like Mark Twain said, the rumors about my death were largely exaggerated. The same goes for the situation with Russia.
President Putin said that Russia would not hesitate to use, and I quote, all weapon systems available, end quote, in response to a threat to its territorial integrity. A threat that is all the more menacing, given Russia's intention to annex large swaths of Ukraine in the days ahead.
In March, when I welcomed President Zelensky to address Parliament, I told him he was a champion of democracy. He has rallied Ukrainians, he has shrugged off threats to his own life, and inspired us all with his strength and courage. He is extraordinary, he is heroic, he is relentless. One runs out of adjectives, simpler perhaps to sum it up. He is Ukrainian.
Oh, I think Zelensky is a puppet, and he is putting huge numbers of his own population at unnecessary risk. And quite frankly, most of what comes out of Ukraine is debunked as lies within 24 to 48 hours. The notions of taking and retaking airfields, all of this is nonsense. It hasn't happened.
He's not a hero? I mean, he's standing up for himself and his own people? You don't think he's a hero?
No, I do not. I don't see anything heroic about the man.
I've traveled over 140 countries around the world. As I'll paraphrase the phrase of my own neighborhood. The rest of the countries, the world's not a patch on our genes. If we do what we want to do, we need to do.
When you and I were prodding this narrative about Ukraine, any person that had any questions didn't just immediately throw up a Ukrainian flag in their bio, was instantly called a Russian puppet, right? Asking some very simple questions that everybody should ask. Isn't it suspicious that we were just told that we needed to leave the Afghan war, very sloppily, by the way? We announced that on August 31st, 2021. And then the very next day, on September 1st, America said that we were joining an effort, we were locking arms with the EU to join an effort to help Ukraine join NATO. We left one money laundering operation in which we gave $50 billion of American payers' hard-earned money, and we jumped right into the next one. And how much have we given Ukraine so far? $50 billion. Not enough for this welfare queen. He wants to keep it coming, and that's what he is. President Zelensky is America's welfare queen. And if you want to know where all this money is going, I spent a couple of weeks in Europe. People are saying that Ukrainian officials are buying property in
Joe Bidenapolis.
Bidenakis.
Bidenakis?
It's probably better. Mitsotakis, Bidenakis, I think that's probably.
I think you're right. I think that's a good idea.
Such a pleasure.
And I like to joke about being known as Joe Bidenopoulos in my Greek American community. And I just found it interesting that Biden's being Biden's being an extremist, and it turns out you all are writing about it now. Kind of fascinating. I think the context is that whether or not they're pulling back from Fallujah, and from the Kherson, the city of Kherson. And President Zelensky, you have made it clear that he is open to pursuing, well, let me put it this way. He's not open, but you're open to pursuing peace. You're open to pursuing a just peace. We also know that Putin has no intention of stopping this cruel war.
ארצות הברית, גם עם גרמניה, גם עם צרפת.
אז הם בעצם חדלו את זה?
בגדול, כן. בגדול הם חדלו את זה, ובאותו זמן חשבתי שהם שוגים.
That was former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett in an interview posted to his YouTube channel this week.
That there were options for peace and that the U.S. not only didn't take them, but actively sabotaged them.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States is committed to ensuring that the brave Ukrainian people can continue to make sure the Ukrainian government can keep providing basic fundamental services to the Iranian people, like health care, education, and emergency personnel.
This is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to, once and for all, remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the consequences of all of this are not borne by citizens in our countries, or for that matter, around the world.
4 months into this thing, I like the structural path we're on here. As long as we help Ukraine with the weapons they need and the economic support, they will fight to the last person. So Secretary Blinken, I didn't think there was an issue under the sun that would get 100 votes. We found it. Russia's a state sponsor of terrorism.
There is no legal framework for the EU to recognise a state sponsor of terrorism. You just pulled this antagonistic performance out of thin air. Even the US, who have such a legal mechanism, have refrained from applying the label to Russia. Biden has argued that doing so could impact future efforts to negotiate a peace deal. The European Parliament, instead of pursuing peace and an end to this bloody war, a war that's killing tens of thousands, decimating European industry and jobs, creating soaring inflation and an unprecedented cost of living crisis. Instead of any effort at diplomacy to remedy this disaster, you have voted to call Russia names. The idea that any representative of a NATO member state would label anyone else a sponsor of terrorism before calling out their own state is absurd.
And therefore, I've said already in the last days, yes, we have to do more to defend Ukraine. Yes, we have to do more also on tanks. But the most important and the crucial part is that we do it together and that we do not do the blame game in Europe, because we are fighting a war against Russia and not against each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister.
To help counter Ukraine's brutal aggression that's happening because of Russia. All to help counter Ukraine's brutal aggression that's happening because of Russia.
Do you favor or oppose some sort of arrangement similar to your arrangement where sanction removal was traded to enhance diplomacy? Do you favor that for legislative sanctions on individuals?
Senator Paul, in the context of a Russian decision to negotiate seriously and withdraw its forces from Ukraine and return territory, I would certainly favor, and I believe Secretary Blinken would also favor,
I don't think hardly taking off sanctions on a member of the Duma is going to be traded for the end of the war. I mean, I wish it were that easy. What I'm talking about is allowing members of their Duma, many of whom may be favorable to our country, to travel to our country, and vice versa. I'm talking about diplomatic legislative exchange. I'm not talking about trading it for peace. I'm sure that would be great, but I don't think that's really on the table, trading, removing sanctions on Senator Risch for peace. I wish that were important enough, but I don't know that that's going to happen. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about very small, incremental removal of sanctions on legislative members in exchange for them doing the same.
Senator, all of the members of the Duma on whom we have sanctions are people who have supported Russia's war, the annexation of Crimea, etc.
That would be about 90% of the people of Russia. I mean, it probably would be 90% of the Duma. We only have sanctions on 25 or 30, but I would venture to say every member of the Duma probably supports Crimea. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is their perspective. And if we were going to sanction people for their belief in, their sort of nationalist version of the world, then we won't have any discussion between people or any legislative exchange.
Senator, I would say that if it is in U.S. interest for there to be conversations with Russians, we should look hard at what can be done to facilitate those.
I would argue that it is.
Mr. President! Mr. President! Mr. President!
He made a historic miscalculation and is struggling to deal with the position in which he has now placed his own country. He won't use nuclear weapons because it would instantly extinguish the last flicker of Chinese support. It would lose him every one of the world's swing voters from India to Africa to Latin America. He would terrify his own people, if he did so, who would live in dread of the consequences for them. He would plunge Russia into such a cryogenic freeze of economic isolation as to make the present sanctions regime seem like a blessing. And it would not even work, because I don't believe for a minute he would stop the Ukrainians from fighting for their hearths and their homes and their families. And so we mustn't fall for this trick of trying to portray, that he does, of trying to portray this conflict as a standoff between a nuclear-armed NATO and a nuclear-armed Russia, because that is not what is happening here.
Women in my cabinet, more than half the people in my cabinet, more than half of the women in my administration are women.
Понеділок, вечір. Ви знаєте, ми звикли говорити, понеділок день важкий, в країні війна, тож кожен день понеділок. Я залишаюсь тут, залишаюсь у Києві, на Банковій, не ховаючись, і нікого не боюсь, стільки, скільки потрібно, щоб перемогти у цій нашій вітчизняній війні.
Let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us.
We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracies have grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more, and doing more. Look, there's no way that Putin is going to be able to quote. He's already lost Ukraine. The idea that he's ever going to be able to occupy. Well, here's what he thought. He thought that if he invaded Ukraine, first of all, he'd get a welcome by every Russian speaker. They'd say, come on in. Secondly, he thought what would happen is that NATO would collapse. NATO would not do anything. Right. They'd be afraid to act. Then he thought, anyway, go down the line. None of that's happening.
To the Ukrainians saying they don't have enough ammo. And even our Defense Department is saying we might have to figure out a way to get more funding so that we have enough ammo for ourselves and to give to allies like Ukraine. What is Biden's responsibility in trying to make sure that people in America whose support for Ukraine is softening will want to continue to try to help them?
Well, I'm going to try to help explain to the American people that defeating the Russians in Ukraine is the single most important event going on in the world right now. It will save us an enormous amount of money down the road if the Ukrainians can succeed.
The Cabinet and the Commission started to work with the White House and with the Treasury already in December on potential sanctions in case that Russia would invade Ukraine. Indeed, we all hoped that it would never happen and we would never have to use these sanctions. But it was a tedious work day and night to align our very different trade systems, to develop sanctions that are targeted at advanced technologies and goods that are irreplaceable.
Through the empire, really, being the masters of that empire. And if people admire dictators, there is no obstacle in becoming one or submitting to one. So how to really, tackle that cycle is that history matters. I mean, our history books were rewritten after we regained our independence to reflect all the crimes that were committed. It was not the same for Russia. They are teaching and learning from the Soviet history books. So the accountability is of utmost importance for the crimes of aggression.
Ultimately, the people closest to Putin, those who have to deal with him, those who he's keeping at the end of 40-foot tables while he issues bizarre orders, they're the ones who need to act. They need to act for the good of Russia. They need to stop him. Whether or not this has turned into some kind of physical or mental problems that he either had or has in some way come down with, we don't know. But his behavior is dangerous, and it's dangerous to the future of Russia. So my hope is that the people who are watching him, those who get close enough to see in person his behavior, which is so erratic, that they can try to prevent him from doing things that will not only be tragic for Ukraine, but tragic for Russia, too. This should be stopped for Russia's sake.
No more questions? They said, no, she has to go.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now? Hot sauce. Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now, listen,
yes.
I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people again.
Okay. Is it working?
Бессовестно, двулично они вели себя, разрушая Югославию, Ирак, Ливию, Сирию. От этого позора никогда им не отмыться. Понятие чести, доверия, порядочности не для них. За долгие века колониализма, диктата, гегемонии они привыкли, что им все позволено. Привыкли плевать на весь мир. Оказалось, что также пренебрежительно, по-господски они относятся и к народам своих собственных стран. Их-то они ведь тоже цинично обманули баснями или обманывали баснями о поиске мира, о приверженности резолюциям Совета Безопасности ООН по Донбассу. Действительно, западные элиты превратились в символ тотальной, беспринципной лжи.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 46th President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
Hello, Poland. came back from a trip after being away for a couple of days, and I had these terrible headaches, was diagnosed with having anyway, they had to take the top of my head off a couple times, see if I had a brain, but
They shot down our drone. What should our answer be?
Well, we should hold them accountable and say that if you ever get near another U.S. set flying in international waters, your airplane would be shot down. What would Ronald Reagan do right now? He would start shooting Russian planes down if they were threatening our assets.
Iraq was a problem that had to be dealt with.
Weapons of mass destruction.
We thought he had weapons of mass destruction.
When I was in your position, I was suggesting we bomb Belgrade. I was suggesting that we send American pilots in and blow up all the bridges on the Drina.
Should Putin be tried for war crimes? Should Putin be tried for war crimes in Ukraine?
Мы не обошли вниманием ситуацию вокруг Украины. Полагаем, что многие из положений, выдвинутого Китаем мирного плана, созвучны российским подходам и могут быть взяты за основу для мирного урегулирования, когда к нему будут готовы на Западе и в Киеве. Однако такой подход, пока такой готовности с их стороны мы не наблюдаем. Но более того, вот только что мне сообщили, в то время, когда мы с председателем обсуждали вопрос возможности реализации китайского плана мирного урегулирования, а председатель КНР уделил большое внимание своим мирным инициативам в ходе нашей вчерашней беседы с глазу на глаз, вот сегодня стало известно, что Великобритания устами заместителя главы Министерства обороны этой страны объявила не только о поставках танков на Украину, но и снарядов с объединенным ураном. Похоже, что Запад действительно решил воевать с Россией до последнего украинца уже не на словах, а на деле. Но хотел бы в этой связи отметить, что если все это будет происходить, то соответствующим образом Россия вынуждена будет реагировать, имея в виду, что коллективный Запад начинает применять уже оружие с ядерным компонентом.
Перемены, которые не было в течение 100 лет. Там, где вместе двигаем эти перемены. Перейдите, пожалуйста, дорогой друг.
Are you familiar with the ICC arrest warrant being that was issued against Putin?
Yes.
Do you think that's sound?
I think we've all seen, Senator, the atrocities and war crimes committed in Ukraine, and we believe strongly, as we said.
I think the president said he thought that was a sound approach.
There needs to be accountability.
Yeah. If Putin came to the United States for whatever reason, would we turn him over to the ICC?
Well, I can't get ahead of that because obviously I have to look at the laws and rules. As you know, we're not actually a party to the ICC, so I don't want to engage in that hypothetical. But
I would encourage you that if he came here, we should turn him over.
Now, I don't think he has any plans to travel here soon.
Yeah. Well, would you encourage our European allies to turn him over?
I think that anyone who is a party to the court and has obligations should fulfill their obligations.
Last September, Nord Stream pipelines were blown up. You're now in a formal setting. Can you assure the world that no agency of the U.S. government blew up those pipelines or facilitated that action?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband. And I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. God. Ben, how are you, pal? One of the best guys in the United States Congress, Ben Cardin. Folks, welcome to the White a delight to have you all here. And who are those good-looking kids back there? They're your kids, all four of them? Well, stand up, guys.
John, we'll jump back in here. Considering the moment,
we were told
that
that
the shooting that just happened left 3 children dead, 3 adults dead, shooters dead, and we were told he would be addressing this off the top.
Do you think the presence of the U.S. military in Syria is illegal or not?
That's not an issue that we're dealing with at this stage. There's been a war.
But is that because it sounds very familiar. This week we talk a lot about the UN Charter, the international law, and relative resolutions. But it sounds to me a foreign military-based presence in another country without invitation sounds like something else to me. You know.
I'll leave your analysis to you. There's at this stage.
What's the difference between Syria, the situation in Syria and the situation in Ukraine?
There's no U.S. armed forces inside of Syria, and so I don't have a. It's not a parallel situation.
You're sure there's no U.S. military personnel?
I believe there's military activity.
Yeah.
But in terms of a ground presence in Syria, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, 5 U.S. service members were injured in that attack. If there were no U.S. service members in Syria, how could they got injured? That's weird, right? Should I ask you about that?
Tape orchestrating a coup in Ukraine. We're not making this up. Here's the tape from 2014.
Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. So that's the lady who lectures us about democracy, subverting democracy in a foreign country, getting caught, and then getting an even better job, and then pushing another pointless war in our country, this one against Russia. She's one of the architects of this war. No one is driving this nation into a conflict against both Russia and China. We can't win that war. We will lose that war. It will destroy our country. But Victoria Nuland has never been punished for any of this. Once again, she's been promoted. The destruction that she has wrought is really almost beyond fiction. Here she is bragging about blowing up critical infrastructure in Europe. Watch.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom.
There's nothing our nations can't achieve if we do it together. I really mean it. So thank you all. God bless you all. Let's go lick the world. Let's get it done.
Уважаемый товарищ министр, перевод идет, все нормально?
Jeśli stracimy Ukrainę, stracimy pokój na dziesięciolecia. Porażka na Ukrainie może być początkiem końca złotego wieku Zachodu.
I think that we should come out of this room with a lot of optimism, right? Because we're hearing about all these reforms and preparing for the European Union integration, which is certainly going to address many of the issues we've been talking about for years. That might have kept people from putting long-term capital into Ukraine. So I think that you said at the very beginning, Secretary, that we have to win this war. We have to get this resolved. I think that there is desire to put private capital. We need the enabling capital now. But I know even with our own conversations internally in city that, and we do have. We do have lines to clients. We do have the ability to keep the business going to a certain extent, and thankfully, because of the different development organizations that can provide some backing in the ECAs, we're going to need that ECA multilateral development money. But I can't emphasize enough that the behavior and the products that they provide are going to have to change in order to mobilize the size of private capital that we need. We need to scale this.
All NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a NATO member. But the main focus now is, of course, on how to ensure that Ukraine prevails.
Будем называть вещи своими именами.
никто не разрешал западному меньшинству говорить от имени всего человечества. Надо вести себя прилично и уважать всех членов международного сообщества. Насаждая основанный на правилах порядок, его авторы высокомерно отвергают ключевой принцип Устава ООН – суверенное равенство государств. Квинтэссенцией комплекса исключительности стало гордое заявление главы дипломатии Евросоюза Борреля о том, что Европа – это райский сад, а остальной мир – джунгли.
I've traveled over 140 countries around the world. As I'll paraphrase the phrase in my own neighborhood. The rest of the countries, the world's not a patch on our genes. If we do what we want to do, we need